Welcome back, folks, to my WrestleRant video series where I give my in-depth analysis of all the pay-per-views that I watch on the WWE Network. Today I'll be talking about the 2007 installment of Cyber Sunday, as seen on the WWE Network, so let's go back right now and review it. Kicking off the show was a stretcher match between Rey Mysterio and Finlay, and a long drawn-out rivalry between these two going into the fall of 2007. I think they had a match at No Mercy of that year as well, leading into this stretcher match. And this was when Finlay was still considered a big deal. At that point in time, he really wasn't doing much, or at least after this. And about a year later, I mean, going into the whole Finlay and a Hornswoggle and Great Khali thing in late 2007, this will probably be considered as one of the last top-tier feuds that Finlay was a part of before becoming an essential joke in the WWE as a fan favorite. But as a heel, though, he was very good. I thought he was always underutilized in the WWE. This was a great example of that. But a very good match between Rey Mysterio and Finlay. Not a great stretcher match to kick off the show. I just have never really been a fan of stretcher matches. I don't find them exciting. I didn't find this one all that exciting, nor did I find the one between John Cena and Kane from earlier this year as I record this all that exciting either. So with that being said, I mean, it was good for what it was. Rey Mysterio and Finlay had a very good chemistry together, but stretcher matches are just not my thing personally. And I just think the whole concept of a stretcher match is dumb, and the fact that you have to roll your opponent over the line on the stage, or in this case, it was only near the ring. But it's so stupid because you never really need to incapacitate your opponent. All you have to do is just get them over the line, and they can incapacitate you at any second and put you on the stretcher and just roll you over the line. So it's a really dumb gimmick, in my opinion. I've never really been a fan of it, but like I said before, it was a fine match for what it was, a fine opening. But a stretcher match is just not my personal favorite match, stipulation, whatever, in wrestling history, in my opinion, anyway. Up next for the ECW Championship, we had CM Punk defending his ECW title against The Miz in what was a good matchup, one of the eye-opening performances from The Miz. And it's just amazing to see how far he's come in the last, I mean, this is 7 years ago, and he came a long way within the last 3 or 4 years after this, going into his run as WWE Champion only 3 years after this event. But to see him going from facing guys like CM Punk to facing CM Punk once again for the WWE Championship in the main event of TLC 2011, 3-4 years later, is still pretty surreal. The Miz came a long way. I mean, like I said before, he was not a great worker, and him and Punk never really had the best of chemistry. Later on they did, but early on, like these kind of matches, there were just a lot of botches and not a great match whatsoever. Like I said before, kind of an eye-opening performance from The Miz as a singles competitor. He was still trying to find his own as a singles wrestler. I mean, he was still trying to find his craft, hone his craft, and all that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't say he had an impressive performance, but he kind of showed some potential there as a singles guy later down the line. But it was very clear from this matchup that he and Punk did not have the best of chemistry, and it's really not all that surprising that the two are not the best of friends in 2014, or at least from what I understand anyway. So up next, we had the singles match between Mr. Kennedy and Jeff Hardy. These two, I think, were voted to face the WWE Champion, or I'm sorry, what was it? Yeah, the WWE Champion Randy Orton later on in the night. They were involved in the poll along with Shawn Michaels. Obviously, once again, Shawn Michaels won that poll, as he did in 04 and 05 of Taboo Tuesday, only a few years prior, so some deja vu there. But so they took the losers of that poll, much like they do every year. Every year up to this point, they had usually just put the losers of the poll in a tag team title match, as they did at Taboo Tuesday 04 and 05. On this show of Cyber Sunday 07, they put the losers of that poll in their own match together. And I mean, Michaels and Orton and Kennedy and Hardy, they were all kind of feuding with each other going into this event, but the feud kind of focused down to Mr. Kennedy and Jeff Hardy. And they would go on to trade victories for the remainder of 2007. So this, of course, was a very good matchup. Only got about 9 minutes. I mean, definitely could have used more time. But for what it was a good matchup. Like I said before, two solid mid-carders on Monday Night Raw. Mr. Kennedy, by this point, was really kind of a lost cause. The illegitimate son storyline did not go his way. Neither did the World Heavyweight Championship run that was primed for him earlier in 2007. So the year of 07 was not the year for Mr. Kennedy. That much is for sure. But this was a good matchup, a good showing from the two, Mr. Kennedy picking up the victory, and of course prolonging that feud going into Survivor Series the following month. Up next, we had Kane taking on MVP for the United States Championship. Kane was voted in this matchup. I believe initially it was supposed to be MVP and Matt Hardy defending their tag team titles against who? I'm not really sure. It might have been Mark Henry and Great Khali. I could be wrong, but I probably am. But I do know that they were scheduled to face each other or defend those tag team titles on this show, Matt Hardy and MVP, that is. And, of course, Matt Hardy came down with some health issue, so he had to pull out. And this was not the first time that happened either. I believe MVP had to pull out of one of their matches, or maybe it was MVP. I can't remember. Maybe it was Matt Hardy. But earlier that year, they were supposed to do that beer fest when they were doing those contests on a weekly basis at SummerSlam, and one of them had to pull out, and Stone Cold came in instead. And then, of course, during the tag team feud, when they had their whole thing going on as a tag team, they had to drop the titles because Matt Hardy got injured. So a lot of injuries going on between Matt Hardy and MVP at this point in time. But even so, though, I mean, this was a fine matchup between MVP and Kane. Really nothing all that great. Only went about 7 minutes. U.S. title on the line. It was pretty obvious the title was not going to change hands because this match was a last-minute decision, with Matt Hardy being ruled out of competition at the very last minute. So they had to find, a quick opponent for MVP, and of course they knew Kane was going to be voted in over Mark Henry and the Great Khali, considering Kane was the only babyface of the three in that poll at the time. But, like I said, it was not a great match, but it did kind of bring back some memories. I'm glad the commentators brought it up, too, that the two had a very long feud in the latter half of 2006 when MVP first came on the WWE scene on SmackDown. So these two had history with each other going into this contest, so I was glad to see the commentators acknowledge that. But aside from that, though, this was not really anything, all that special. It was kind of a decent match for what it was. MVP retained that title on countout. So up next for the WWE Championship, Shawn Michaels contending for that title against Randy Orton. Another very, very good match between HBK and RKO, as only one could expect from these two. And it had history going back to earlier on in the year when Michaels was taken out by Randy Orton after he was punted in the head and all that kind of stuff. And Shawn Michaels only to return the night after, no mercy, I want to say, to contend for that title against Randy Orton at Survivor Series. It was pretty obvious. I know Michaels was involved in the poll with Jeff Hardy and Mr. Kennedy, but it was pretty obvious that he was winning that poll because fans so desperately wanted to see him get his hands and revenge on Orton by taking that WWE title away from him. But of course, Randy Orton had just won that title only a few weeks prior to this, so it was mind-boggling to think that Orton would lose that championship on this show, and of course he didn't. Shawn Michaels would win, but only via disqualification after a low blow from Randy Orton. So a cheap finish to an otherwise very, very good match. I've got about 15 minutes. But aside from that, though, they've had better matches in the past. This was also a very good contest. Just the finish for me the finish to me was not all that creative, especially since you're just coming off a count-out win from Kane. So to do a count-out loss and then a disqualification loss for Randy Orton, I thought was... To do a back-to-back, at the very least, was kind of screwy, especially on a pay-per-view. I wouldn't accept that on a Raw more often than not. But then to go on and do it on a pay-per-view, I thought was pretty dumb. But it did build towards their pay-per-view match at Survivor Series about a year later, or about a month later, where the stipulation was, and I'll probably review this at one point, where Shawn Michaels, he could not use his Sweet Chin Music, but Orton, if he got himself disqualified, would lose the WWE title. So they would have a very good match at Survivor Series about a month later. This was, like I said before, a very, very good matchup, especially for the time that it got, about 15, 16 minutes. But they did have better encounters in the past, and the finish for me, it didn't really do anything for this viewer. I'll just say that much. So up next, we had Triple H versus Umaga in a street fight. This was just pretty much Triple H's leftovers. I know these two were scheduled to have a feud going to No Mercy, and they did have that matchup with Triple H defeating Umaga to retain his WWE title before losing it later on in the night against Randy Orton. Whole lot of bullshit that night, and a lot of historic title wins and losses and whatever else. But so they kind of resumed that feud. Triple H kind of took his focus away from Randy Orton for one night. I know that feud between Triple H and Orton only lasted that show, but they, transcended from that feud back to Triple H and Umaga, the feud that it originally was at this point in time. So they went back to the drawing board with this matchup. It was a very, very good contest for being a street fight. Got about 17 minutes. This was also one of Umaga's last top-tier feuds. Of course, he would get defeated by the Game. But after this, Umaga would really not go on to do much in the WWE. He was IC champion earlier on in the year. He was feuding with Bobby Lashley, and he was aligned with Mr. McMahon. He was Intercontinental Champion. After this, though, he would really not go on to do much. I know he was involved at the Survivor Series multi-man tag match about a month later. But going into 2008, I think he might have been in that battle. Oh, no, he faced Batista at WrestleMania 24 in that brand supremacy matchup. Not a great matchup. And then he would go over to SmackDown. They wouldn't do anything with him over there. And he would later get released. And I think 2009. He had a feud with CM Punk before he got released in 2009. And I talked about that in my Extreme Rules review of 2009. So go back and check that out. Cheap plug. But yeah, this would kind of be in a way, the last stand for Umaga. He would lose this matchup. He would not really recover. I mean, he had a pretty impressive year in 06. 07 was not the same. He had a lot of great matches with Triple H on the show, and same thing with John Cena earlier on in the year, but he would lose all of those high-profile matches, so people just stopped believing in Umaga, the Samoan Bulldozer. But for what this was, not long-term thinking here like it was just before, this was a very good matchup, and I was glad to see it get a little higher place on the show, not treated as a mid-card act, because I think Umaga did deserve better and during his time in WWE, not to get the long undefeated push, only to lose to John Cena, and that's what I kind of fear for Rusev at the moment, who is currently undefeated and is set to go one-on-one with John Cena at some point in the very near future. I can pretty much guarantee you of that, but for what this was, though, a very good match from Triple H and Umaga. And, of course, from there we get to our main event for the World Heavyweight Championship. Batista defending against The Undertaker with Stone Cold Steve Austin as his special guest referee. I think the other choices were, let me see here, GBL, and the other one was Mick Foley. So Mick Foley made a small return to WWE for this one matchup, as he did 1 year prior to face Carlito. Or was that 06? I think that might have been 05. I can't remember exactly, but anyway, from Batista-Undertaker standpoint, that rivalry was the year of 2007. They would have a great series of matches over that prestigious prize, the World Heavyweight Championship, and this match was no different. Definitely one of the better matches of that feud. I personally, maybe I'm in the minority here, but I did not love the WrestleMania matchup. I thought it was good. Maybe the fact it took place earlier on in the show didn't help things, but I thought they stole the show that night. They had a very good match, but I thought they had I thought they had better matches down the line at Backlash, not a Judgment Day, the Steel Cage match, this match, the Survivor Series match inside the Cell were all very good matches, and this was among them as well. I think the fact the show, I think, was in Washington, D.C., too, so that definitely helped Batista's case in terms of not getting booed, and it was. So that definitely helped his case in going over here and defeating The Undertaker for the first time in his career in singles competition. But, yeah, another excellent match from Batista and The Undertaker. Stone Cold Steve Austin did not do much as special guest referee, and he would play a much bigger role in the WWE title match, or the World Heavyweight title match, the following year at Cyber Sunday, which I'll talk about in a few more days here on the channel. But for what this was, though, I thought it was an excellent contest with the right winner, Batista finally getting his big singles win over The Undertaker, but they would eventually go on to have a rubber match the next month at Survivor Series, and like I said before, hopefully I'll get to reviewing Survivor Series at some point in time. I'm currently contemplating either reviewing every Survivor Series or only a select few. It really all kind of comes down to how much time I have over the course of November to not only watch them, but review them too, because it does take time and whatever. So we'll have to wait and see. But that being said, though, this was a great main event to an otherwise forgettable show. We'll run down the card real quick. Mysterio and Finlay, fine match, but stretcher matches, like I said before. If you're not a fan of them, you will not like this matchup. CM Punk and The Miz, match. It was pretty meh. Mr. Kennedy and Jeff Hardy having a good match. Kane and MVP, last-minute filler contest. Michaels and Randy Orton, very good contest. Triple H and Umaga, very good match. And the main event between Batista and The Undertaker with Stone Cold Steve Austin as a special guest referee was a great match as well. So I would only really go out of the show for the final three matches, if only for the main event. I thought Michaels and Orton was good, but like I said before, they've had better matches in the past. I did not like the finish, even though the wrestling before that was good. Triple H versus Umaga, while a solid match, was nothing you must go out of your way to see. But Batista and The Undertaker, if you were a fan of that feud over the course of 2007, then you will enjoy this matchup as much as I did. So that was a good way to go off the show. But aside from that, though, this is not a show that I suggest you go out of your way to watch. Not too great. It's Cyber Sunday 2007, but we'll have to wait and see if Cyber Sunday 2008 is much of the same. I'll give my review of that show in the next couple of days, with headlined by Chris Jericho versus Batista for the World Heavyweight Championship. What else happened on that show? We had Triple H versus Jeff Hardy for the WWE title, Chris Jericho versus Batista. So a lot of good matches on Cyber Sunday 08, but did it live up to expectations? I'll talk about that in my review of 08 Cyber Sunday in a few more days here on the channel. So with that being said, folks, always appreciate your viewing. You can like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure to check back in a few more days for my review of 2008 WWE Cyber Sunday as seen on the WWE Network for only $9.99. I'm Graham Jason Matthews, and I'll catch you guys then.